Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope we had a good night rest for what was left of our night yesterday. Apologies for ending this section a little bit late. It's all in the bid to try to cover as much things as possible because we have less time to actually cover some of the things that we have already outlined in this section. And thank you for also waiting alongside, being patient. Thank you also for the interactions. It's quite encouraging that we have a lot of persons following up. And like Madam acknowledged earlier in her speech there, the number of attendants in this section has been quite encouraging, which is why we are considering extending some aspect of this program so that we can actually benefit more from it. The whole essence of this training is targeted at making impacts. So we are here to make sure that as much persons as possible have takeaways from the program. Most oftentimes, there is no how we can actually completely remove theory from all the practice. No matter how we are trying to make it as practical as possible, there will always be some elements of theory. Because just like one of my former boss used to say, if you don't know the principle, then it will be very difficult for you to actually understand how the practice works. Briefly also, we'll not be talking much about this. We have actually done this and we have repeated it. But hopefully, after going through the remaining two things that we have in our spreadsheet today, we'll come back here to actually show us how typical data analysis flow works in a construction company or in any data analysis for any organization that you're working for. That is why I have this table that shows you fundamentals of construction data analysis. Whether you're analyzing data for maybe the manufacturing sector or banking sector or construction industry, these are typical flows, how the data will always come. In the course of yesterday, I introduced us to the first part of it, which is called data collection and cleansing, cleaning and processing. When we introduced the Power Query for the first time, but that is not the proper section for Power Query. We'll be looking at Power Query either at the later part of today's training or in a subsequent date when it will be accepted. So we talked about how you collect your data, how you explore the data and analyze some of them, and then statistical analysis that you need to carry out on your data, and then predictive analysis that you have to carry out on your data. Talking about benchmarking and comparative analysis. Risk. For the purpose of what we are doing today, I intentionally omitted risk because that one too is a big training of its own. How you can be able to carry out your risk metrics, carry out your risk analysis, and all those things. I removed that aspect from this so that we don't boggle people with so much things. Our major concern is to show you how to use some of these tools for data analysis. And we have also introduced some other ones. And of course, we have the visualization and reporting, which is where the main strength of Power BI is. We'll get to that place later. So let's hop back to where we were before yesterday. In the course of yesterday, we talked about forecasting, how you can be able to forecast using some of these indices. But also, Excel has a tool for forecasting, which you can actually use on the fly. Peradventure, you have a trend of data. Let's say we are working with this currency data that we have here. We're able to track this data. Please follow my line of thought here. When you're picking your trend of data, always make sure that you pick the trend that is relevant to what you are working on. I have a data set here that started from 2001 up to 2023. If for any reason I want to use this data to make my projection, now it is always important that you look at the trends of changes that you have been having around you. All throughout 2001 up to 2009, the difference is quite small. The change is quite small. But when you come down to from 2015 up to 2023, you notice a very big marginal change in the data. It simply means that when you are trying to run analysis or forecasting using this data, and you're using the data set beginning from 2021 up to 2023 to make your projections into the future, you will most likely have minimal changes because the application will be looking at the aggregate of all of these things as a trend. And most likely, when you do average of all of these things, it will be giving you a number that is quite small. Okay? Now, just to demonstrate what we are talking about, when you look at this data set that I have here, I have tried to do a simple average of this one, 2001. And you look below here where I have my Excel giving me all my small average. You see that it's telling me that the average is about 237. Whereas when I bring it up to from here and take it up to 2021, let me take it from here up to here. Now you discover that the average is quite huge, bigger than what it was giving me when I was using a larger data set. So this is just mines that you need to be very mindful of. You need to be careful about. Landmines that you need to be very careful about when you're dealing with data. Always make sure that you're picking your data sets, your reference data set from the sections that are important and relevant for you. Don't go and start using the ones that are obsolete so that they don't go ahead to mess up your data sets. Okay? Now, it simply means that if I am to use this Excel forecasting tool to run these calculations now, I will just pick up this data set and come and click Excel, this one now. Under my data, I come down to, on the right side, I have somewhere called forecast. And then under my forecast, I have forecast sheet. Click my forecast sheet. My forecast sheet will automatically select the whole data set as my range. And now look at what it's telling me here. Forecast end is 2019. But this is not end. It is taking the old data and look at the table that it's trying to present for me here. It's picking them from 2001 and up to 2023, where I have live data. And the rest from 2023 down to 2029, which is what I have here, is where it is forecasting for me. And because it is looking at a long stretch whereby there was relatively no changes. Between here and here, you have marginal change. But almost from here to this other point, you have little or no change. And at this point, you have a downward change, then upward rise again. And then there were minimal changes again up to this point, which is around 2014, 2015, before you have the sudden transition up. Now, if you want to have real insights of this data, please, I always advise and encourage you not to pick it up from all these places because the trend is not useful to us. What is most useful to us based on our economy, based on our environment in Nigeria, is this short period of time that we have from here going forward, where you have the erratic movement, where you have more activities happening. Okay, the other ones will always corrupt this trend that you have here, because the real life situation is that after 2014, 2015, the data movement has been so unpredictable. It can easily jump several points all of a sudden, just like you can see. Between 2021 to 2022 and present 2023, it has jumped all of a sudden to where it is today. That is why on the trends of forecasting, it is giving you that these are the possible trend. This is the highest trend of this data, and this is the lowest trend of this data. We can further now go ahead to customize this forecasting so that it will be most useful to us and to suit the circumstances for which we are working on it. When you click the options here, you will now see a new panel will open up for you where you can now be able to change some of the things that you want. Look at the trends that we have here. Keep an eye on these trends that we have here. By the time I start reducing my start dates, at the moment it's picking my start date to be from 2023. By the time I start reducing my start date, you see the trend start changing. Okay? The trend is now changing. This is now my forecast, even though this is the reality. Because I'm shifting it backward, this is now my new forecast. But the most important aspect of the manipulation that I usually rely so much on is not by changing where I am starting it from. It is by coming down to here to change my data range so that it does not pick data that are not important to me. For example, if I come down here and said, okay, I want to work with data from 2015 only, I can rewind it. This is 2015. And it's telling me that the projection is this. You know that you see that from just a mere look at this thing, it's telling you that it's actually very wrong. It's not projecting it very correctly. Reason being that it is only basing the decisions or the calculations based on the trend of data that has existed before 2015. That is where it's leveraging on to make your projections into the future. Okay? But when you now start your data, this thing based on 2023, it will now be leveraging on information of 2023 to make projections into the future. And because it's looking at how sudden this thing was able to change over time, the trend of this data over time, it is now projecting that in 2024, this will be the highest point of your data, while this will be the lowest point of your data. And in between the highest and the lowest, you have the middle point, which is the average. So when I am okay with what I've chosen, now the data we are looking at is projecting into the future into 2029. 2029 may be too far for us to project based on what we have here. So if I start to reduce the number of years of my projection, you see the data trend also continues to change because there are so many underlying calculations that are running behind, which we, in the scope of this work we're doing, we're not going to be talking about it in this program. But let me just stop it at 2025, which is 2 years from now, and click create my data. Okay, another thing that is also very important, if for people that have to understand statistics, there is something that is called the confidence interval. Now, at the moment, we are using a confidence interval of 95%. It means that 95% of my data will be falling in within a particular, I don't know how to analyze, to say that in statistics. That's the confidence ratio, whatever you might call it. All of them will fall in. 95% of my data will be falling in within 95% of this threshold. That is what that confidence ratio means. The more ratio or the more confidence that I have, the more it will become wider. The more wider will be the margin of my listing. So the lesser confidence that you have, the more it will narrow down the gap between your highest rates and your lowest expected rates. So let me put it by default, it's always on 95. And most analysis that you'll be doing will always be based on 95% confidence interval. And then, of course, this one now says, okay, this data trend that we have here, what is the marginal change, the trend of data? How often does your data change seasonally? At the moment, it's running it automatically, but I often like to know that because if you look at the transitions, you discover that whenever there is a transition, there is usually more change in the data. Because of government policies, there is always more change in data. Because of maybe one economic growth or the other, there is usually changes in the data. So I can say that my data set is always changing at every 4 years interval, since I have this data outlined in years. So my data set is changing at every 4 years interval. My calculation will not change to predict that change to always happen at every 4 years interval. It is not the same when I run it as automatic. It doesn't give the same, all right? Always know that so that you have the flexibility of choosing the seasonal changes that you observe on your data, how often it happens or takes place. Ours is every 4 years, which is every transition. Or you can even go ahead to make it every 8 years, which is every transition. And that 8 years will account for the major change that was witnessed between 2015 up to 2023, where we have this thing. All right. So when you are done with that, now the next thing is this place is where, assuming that the data is speaking from a range that I don't want. Like in my case now, I want only to analyze data that is from between 2015 and 2023. So I can come here and click this place and the data will be picking timeline range. The timeline range is the time that I have here. And I will remove the whole of this, delete them, and use this one to pick from 2023 up to 2015. I will also come here also to do the same thing on my value range. I will delete the value range that I have here currently, pick also from 2023 up to 2015. But one thing you need to ensure is that the range of your values are the same. In my own, I am picking from row 3 down to row 11. And when you have done it together, it stands as, okay, when you have missing points, assuming there is a particular year I don't have data, how do you want the application to analyze that empty point there? Now, the standard that we're using is interpolate. It will ask you to interpolate between numbers, values that are around that space where you have it, more or less calculating it with the average. It will take the average of what is here and what is here and try to reuse it to insert anywhere you have an empty space. But you're not restricted to using that alone. You can actually put 0 in place of any place where you have empty so that it will analyze it using 0. And then when you have duplicate figures in your this thing, how do you analyze it? You analyze it. It's always wise to analyze it as an average. Now, if you look at that data we have now, you discover that this is actually different from what we have before when we are analyzing a larger data set. When we are analyzing it from 2001 up to 2023, it was giving us a very different slope. But now it is giving us more a realistic slope based on the trend of the data between 2015 up to 2000 this place. So you have to be very mindful of it. You have to be watchful. Always know where you want to pick your data sets from. All right. So I'll go ahead and click my create, and the application would have gone ahead to prepare the charts. Okay. But where I want to take our attention to is mostly on this place. Now, where you have here, this is the timeline that we have already. And this is the values that we have. And these are the forecasted average. This is the forecasted average. This is the lowest confidence rates. And this is the highest confidence rates. Now, for the year that we have, we know we have this figure already, 2023. We have 770, 770, 770. But by 2024, the lowest confidence rate that we have will be that if for any reason, based on the trends that we have here, this data is to fall, it will not fall below 435 naira per dollar. And if for any reason, based on the trend of analysis, it will not go above 834 naira 04 kobo. Then also for 2000 and then the average of two of them is when you add this and this together and divide them by 2, it will give you that the trend would that be that dollar, which was costing about 770 naira, based on this trend, will now cost about 634 naira. Now, that is the same thing that is repeated, projecting into the future until you get up to the marginal cost of 2031, which will now be around 1,066 naira or 664 naira per dollar. But the average of two of them together will now give you about 865 naira. Sometimes, some people want to use, so they always say, it is always better for you to overprice than to underprice, because there is no consideration for underpricing. All right. So some other persons might choose to use the upper confidence bound instead of the middle forecasted value. So this is how you can be able to make forecasts. So if maybe I want to speculate dollar on a project that I'm working on, I can use this thing now to make my speculations, and I won't be far from the target, because it is analyzing the trend based on the trends of events that I have before it. That is why the application is now projecting into the future and telling me that based on this trend that you have over this period of time, this is what will be the trend. But remember, I always advise that if you look at this chart that we have here, this trend that we have between 2016 up to 2019 may not be making much impact as much as the decision that caused a spike between 2021 to 2023. What do you think would happen if we are to analyze this data using only this time interval of 2022 to 2023? These confidence ratios will change. All of them will change to reflect this major spike, because for now, things have not normalized, and predicting based on this trend might not be enough to actually tell you the direction that events are going. This is where you need to have understanding of how to look at, to extract only the important information that are available in your data. Now, let us do something now. I'll come and click anywhere inside this my table and go back again, click that my forecast. It will go ahead and open that table. It will open down my table. I will still go ahead now. Let me adjust some of the information that I have here. Now, I want my data trend to start from 2021. Let's pick it from 2021. And 2021 is on my row number 8. So I'll come down here. Instead of row 1, I'll pick it from row 8 and make sure that this other one too also has the same width of range, which is row 8, and click OK. Now, the data is now analyzing that actually based on this trend between 2021 going into the future, you now know that you now have a continuous rise. This is different from what we have on this other place, where you're talking about is now projecting that we are going to be having a decline. All right, before a sudden rise. So it's always very important for you to choose the data range, the data sets that are useful to you. Some of these data might not must be useful again, because whatever caused it to spike at this point and make it to level at this point might not still be there to keep it again from spiking at this very point. That is always why it is important for you to choose the relevant points on your data sets that are useful to you. Don't choose the ones that are already obsolete, that does not have much impact. So if we are intending to use this thing as our projections on our data sets, the most likely place that we have to be picking it up from has to be from 2021, which is the most recent past, projecting into the future. And now you discover that the trend of your data is that it is constantly on the rise. And when I've come down to this point, I can always say, okay, I click OK, create again. It will go ahead and redraft or redraw that projections. And this, what we have here now, is more or less a reflection of our today's reality. When you look at it closely, in 2023, within this period that we have been here around here, data trend, the exchange rate is always constantly on the high rise. If I got the information correctly, somebody mentioned that yesterday, dollar is almost edging into the 1,000 threshold, and which is what we already have happening here. Because we are analyzing our data based on yearly, not on monthly. If it's on monthly, it would have also given us that indication that it's either this month or thereabout that the dollar will be climbing up into the 1,000 threshold. So this is how we can be able to run this forecasting using this forecast tool that is also available on Microsoft. So I call for questions. If we have any questions at every point in time, go to the question and answer, post your questions there so that whenever we pause, we can take the questions at that time. Now we are done with that. Let us now move over to the cash flow, which is the main thing that we are here for today. If we want to talk about cash flow, permit me to call our attention to something. If you're talking about cash flow, there are things you need to understand that are important aspects or components of your cash flow. One important aspect or component of your cash flow is time. You need to have defined a time for your project. And by time, I mean the projected period of your construction must have a beginning and an end. And the second thing that you also need to understand is you also need to have your, I mentioned to us while I was presenting the other time, what is called contractors preliminary. It needs to be part of your cash flow also. I'm not talking about the main preliminary that the clients who you'll be executing on behalf of the clients. That's not the one I'm referring to. I'm referring to those basic ones that will form part of your working process or methodology, which are not covered by the client's preliminary. Okay? Now, another thing also that we need to talk about is we need to also know, once we are talking about the time, we need to know, I'll go to the contract conditions to know what is the advance payment, what is the retention amount, what is the period of amortization of advance payment, then what are the contractor's expenses, and more importantly, we need to know what is the progress rates. All right. Now, progress rate is very important, which defines to a large extent most of the calculations that we'll be running on will be taking their leverage from progress rates. And let me get back to the application so that we can see what we are talking about. There are also another aspect which is also very important. And when you look at this thing, you discover that these things are not entirely complete. There is one other aspect which we'll call your indirect costs. Remember, I mentioned this indirect cost when I was talking about some of the things that you do inside your overhead. So note these things. We need to define our progress rates. We need to define the time interval. We need to define the contractor's preliminaries. We need to define the advance payment. We need to define the retention amount. We need to define the amortization rate of our advance payments. Then we also need to define the contractor's expenses, indirect expenses. And then, of course, we need to define the net cost of the work. This net cost of the work is the net cost of the work, actual contractor's work, and does not include profit, overhead, or any other add-on that you're going to be considering. So let me just get back to the sheet of advance payment that we have for us to have this, to see how it plays out. Now, some of those things that I've mentioned to us are what is here. But for you to begin, you need to start from this section, which is the time interval and performance, you need to define your performance. The first thing you need to define is your performance and your time interval. Remember, I listed out, you need to define your time interval. You're working on a project that you have quoted that this project will be delivered in 36 months. Now, while you're not doing your studying the tender conditions or the contract agreement, you discover that the contractor says or puts a clause there that there will be 1 year for deferred liability period. It simply means that when you're doing your cash flow, you will first of all include your 36 months for construction activities, and then you now include the rest of the 12 months for actual deferred liability period to conclude. That is why you say 36 plus 12 will be giving you around 48. So all two period that you have for your construction time, cash flow will have to be 48 months. But actual construction will only take place between month 1 and month 36 when you hand over the project. Then the deferred liability period will now take effect from that period when the client is now using the product to when he will pay you off your retention. Okay. Once you have established this timeline, the next thing for you to establish is what is your performance rates? Based on your experience, how do you intend to progress in this project? Now, to make it simple, I have listed out some things here, which are basically the basis for calculating my progress. What I said is that I intend to, within the first 2 months of mobilizing on site, I intend to achieve about 2% of the work, because within that first 2 months, you're only gathering things and making clearance. So not much is actually taking place. But within the next 30 months that is coming after the 2 months, I should have achieved about 95% of the work. And then within the next 4 months that will come after the 30 months, I should have achieved about 3% of the work, thereby handing over the project at 36 months. Follow me again. I said I am projecting that in 2 months' time of mobilizing on site, I should have achieved 2% of the work. In 30 months' time of mobilizing on the site, I should have achieved about 95% of the work. And in 4 months' time of mobilizing on site, in 4 months' time after achieving my 30%, I should have concluded the project, which is when I will now wrap up the remaining 3%. Now remember, there are 2 months that are inside this 2% that is here. It simply means that when I divide 2% by 2 months, I will be giving 1% progress every month. And also, when I come down to the 30 months of my actual construction activity, when I have full activities, it simply means that within this period also, I should be achieving about 95% of my work. And then when I say 95% divided by my 30 months, it will give me about 3.1667%. That means in each month of these 30 months, what I will be doing in every month is achieving about 3.1667% of the work. Similarly also, when at the tail end of it, for the remaining 4 months towards the end of the project, I will be using it to achieve 3% of the work. And when I divide that 3% of the work per month, it will be giving me that I will be achieving about 0.75% of the work in every month. These things I'm saying, I'm just breaking down here. This is more like a straightforward rule. Different organizations have different ways that they determine their work progress that they will input on the discipline. But for easy references, this program I have here, you can actually go ahead and subdivide your own progress into multiple progress. But for purpose of simplicity, I have made it to be into 3 different ranges so that we can have something like a parabola, whereby we'll start slowly, then we'll crescent up to 30 months, and then we'll bring it down again and wrap it up. Simple parabola. Okay. Now, when I have achieved this, now the next thing is for me to say, okay, the first 2 months, I will come down to the first 1 month and say, okay, first 1 month, this is what I will be doing. The first 2 months again, this is 1% again. I'll move over again to from the month 3 up to month 34. I will be achieving 3.1% every month. I will go ahead and insert them also along that month up to month 32. Then the progress will now change to 0.75%. That is 0.75% that I will have for the 4 months that will be remaining until I hand over my project, which is in 36 months. Once you have done this, no actual construction activity is taking place here. That is why you have zero progress all throughout until 40-something months. Yeah, QS Modisor says, hello, you make mention of empty space on the forecasting table by either taking the average or enter zero. I need more clarification in that regard. Why not stick only to one option? Yes, you shouldn't stick only to one option because any of the options you take will give you a different result. So it is better that instead of you, sometimes when you're running a calculation and you're running an average and you're skipping a number in between, it simply means when you're talking about average, that number that you have just skipped will be counted as something as zero. When you're doing plus, it will be added as zero, and then it will be divided by the total number, including that number that occupies that zero, thereby reducing what is supposed to be your perceived average. So 2 ways that you can always work around that is when you want to allow it to be zero, then it will be divided, thereby having a lesser number, or you want to allow it to be an average so that that gap does not remain empty. Because in reality, you might actually have something that will be filling up that gap. It's just that at that moment, it was not provided for. So I will always advise whenever you have a data set that you want to work on and you have an empty spot or empty cell or empty location in your data set, it's always better for you to fill it up with anything. At worst, use average in between intervals to fill up that space so that it doesn't mess up with your trend or your calculations. Remember the next thing I told us about that we need to have established the cost of our work. When we're talking about our sample bill of quantity, we calculated that when you do your estimates based on the work that you have around you, your full costing gives you a price, which is what we have here. This figure that we have here is the cost of this our work. Whereas this other one that we have here is the price of the work. The costing is the cost of the work to you as an executioner, as a contractor. Whereas the price of the work is the cost of the work to the clients. Your price includes all the add-ons that you have already included. Your markup, your profit, your labor, all those considerations, your contractors, preliminaries, and the rest of them. They are all considered as part of your pricing. Whereas the actual things that go into doing the work itself alone are only considered as part of your costing. So in our typical sample BOQ that we have here, we used a cost price of 2.06 million as cost of our project to us as contractors. And this amount is what you'll be spending as a contractor. Whereas this amount is what you should be expecting to be getting from the client. Now, this is your cash outflow or your cash out. And this one will be your cash inflow or your cash in. But most often times, remember, VAT, like we have expressed before now, is not your money. So contractors don't always think that this amount is your money. Look at it as your social responsibility to the state or your civic responsibility to the state. So it's not your money. Most likely, your money that you're calculating and expecting to get will be around this trend. So the client will be expected to, the contractor will be expected to spend as much as 2.06 billion, while he will be getting in as much as 3.409 billion. All right. Now, just mark this figure that we have here. We have about 2.061 billion, which is the cost of our work. So we'll get back to our cash flow. Now, the total value of our work now is what we are trying to establish here, which is 2.061. Why we are bringing it here is because since we will be spending, assuming that our spending will be going on a normal trend, we'll be spending 1%, 3.17% of this total amount. That is what we'll be incurring because the progress of our work will follow this trend. Now, I will come down here and I'll say is equal to, this is the cost of my work. Make sure that you fix it by fixing $sign, Control F4, or you type F4 so that it will become a $sign. All right. Now I've fixed it. Simply means that all of them will, this thing will not move away. It will not move away from where this cell now, where it is now. This will be times 1%. And I'll now say enter. Now it gives me a figure which is 20.613 million naira. I will now drag it down across board. What it will be doing is that it will take this amount and multiply it by this percentage and put it here for me. And by the time I continue doing that up till the last one that I have, it will give me the amount. And anyone that will be doing further will just be giving me 0 because this is 0%. No actual work is taking place here. And in reality, it have distributed that my money, this amount of money, as actual cost of my work over the period that I'll be executing the project. And then it comes down that it will be costing me about 2.061385 thousand naira. In reality, there are actually so many things that can actually make this spending not to flow according to this planning, these projections. Maybe you have rainy season in between any of these places. The rainy season will actually affect your work not to progress as much as you have projected it. But for typical demonstration, we are assuming that the project will flow as expected. And it is always the case in every situation. Now, we have a second column that we have established, which is additional costs. Additional expenses that the contractor might expend as a result of additional expenses that were not taken care of, projected, planned in the actual costing of the work that the contractor is going to be spending. So this column is actually meant to take care of those things. So for each of the months where you're having that additional expenses, you come here and then you put it in. Mind you, the more money you put in here, the more it will affect your cash flow. The more it will make this your red line, which is your outflow, to spike and head above your income. So you just have to make sure that you try to, as much as possible, articulate all the costs, all the funds, all the expenses that you'll be spending on the project, and make sure you build them in on your costing so that you have little or nothing to add in this additional column. But I just have to indicate it also so that you know you have the chance of adding additional costs that you might incur as a result of one thing or the other that happens alongside. Now, when we have done that, we now come down to actual months. Now, in actual month, now you're not doing this projected expenses for a month plus the additional expenses that you have incurred at the end of that month. It will give you an amount. That's what you do, like this plus this. We say is equal to, because this place is 0, it will give me the same amount of money. That is what you now drag down also along the whole trend of your data up to the last month, which is 36. Even if you go up to 48, because this place, this plus this is 0, this place will still give you 0. All right. Now, the next thing is, remember, I mentioned to you that you need also to take care of your preliminaries. And when we were doing overhead here, we mentioned some of the preliminaries, which we called contractors overhead. This is the contractors overhead. I call them direct preliminaries on the job. I did not include this section. Note that also, that this section is not included in it. I included it up to what we call preliminaries. And then remember, preliminaries are usually broken down based on time related and fixed. And I have been able to assign some of them, the ones that are time related and the ones that are fixed. Now I will create the same column, the aggregate of time related. This is the ones that are time related, which is about 230 million. And the ones that are fixed related, which is about 172 million. So if you come under my cash flow now, I created my preliminaries also. And then I imported that figure. It's speaking from my overhead. I imported that figure from my overhead. Under my fixed preliminaries, I have 173. And under my time, I have 230 million. Now, one thing you need to consider is this. Under your fixed preliminary, the question you should ask yourself is, how often will you be executing this fixed preliminary? I assumed that I will execute all my fixed preliminary within an interval of 4 months. It simply means that within the space of 4 months, I should have executed my fixed preliminary. You can choose to execute it over a longer period of time, say 5 months or even 6 months. If it is 6 months, make sure you drag it up to the 6th month column. Oh, sorry. What I'm doing is this. I said this amount, make sure you fix it, divided by 6 months. Now, it is giving me 28 million naira as against what I initially had there. I will now go ahead and drag it up to the 6th month. Make sure you drag it up to the 6th month. And if for any reason you did not drag it up to the 6th month, when you look at the total collection that you have at the end here, it will be less the amount that you have. So at the moment, it's giving that I have 143 as against 172. So I just have to make sure that I have it complete. When you drag it complete and check, this figure that you have at the end must always rhyme whatever figure that you are importing. Similarly, also, this figure that I have on my summary here also has to rhyme with the cost of the work, actual work that I'm bringing in. And then for the time related, because we have already established a time progress or a time rate for our job, we'll be using this time rate now to divide this other one, to multiply them. So what we'll now do is we'll say, okay, this amount, make sure that you have it fixed by a certain dollar sign in front of it and at the end of in front of the column and at the end of and in front of the row. Once we have it fixed, the next thing that we need to do is we multiply by this percentage that you have on this side, and you click enter. It will give you an amount of 2 million, and then you drag it across board also, drag it down, and it will give you a figure, drag it down up to the last. At every point in time, make sure that the summary total that is giving you is also equal to the total that you have on top. Okay. For the indirect that I mentioned to us, when you're dealing with indirect costs, we have taken care of from the beginning up to this point that we have here, We have taken all of these ones, we have taken care of them because those are the things that are up above here. Now, the next thing for us to not do is under this, our indirect costs. Remember, these indirect costs are some of the money that you'll be getting as your profits, as direct incomes, and rest of them. But there are some of them also that are not your money. The ones that are not your money are the ones that you have to consider to pay out. But the ones that are your money are the ones that you are going to return for yourself. And you're not going to be expending it out. So if you look at the categories that we have here, we have management fee, we have head office, we have project design risk, we have project construction risk, we have price variation risk, we have withholding task, and we have stamp duty, and we have profits. Now, if you look carefully, you discover that it's not all of them that are not your money. These ones can actually be looked at as management fee is not your money. Even though you're the contractor, the management fee is not your money. It's actually expended on managing the project. So it's not per se your money. The one that is actually your money is the one that you call profits. Okay? So you do a summation of all of these other ones minus profit that is not your money, because you're not going to spend your profit. You're not paying out your profit to anybody. But these other ones too are the things that you have to expend in trying to actually manage the project. But you will retain your profits. Stamp duty, you have to pay stamp duty. Withholding tax, it has to be deducted when they are paying your certificate. Variations, you have to consider it when you go to the market to buy and the cost of things goes up. Design and construction risk, these are things that you have to consider. Head office, you are not going to pay this money out in respect of managing your head office. So all of this from beginning to this point minus this profit are the things that you'll be expending out, amount that you have to pay out. So that is what we have created. Under indirect now, it is only that 15% that we have that is going to be going out. And the total cost of our indirect cost, which we have already established here, is 937,701,033 kobo and 33 naira 63 kobo. This money, we just go and insert this money, reference it from that place, and bring it in here. That is why we have it here. Now, as we have it here now, the question now will now be, how do we start disbursing this money? But there is something you need to note about this now. This money that you're going to be taking, you will not be taking this money from your account and be spending. No. You'll be taking this money. This money will be a function of what you're going to be getting, cash in. Hello. I will repeat it again. This money will be a function of what you're going to be expending. It's not going to be a function of your performance. Because you'll be expending this money as soon as you are getting more money, because this money does not go directly into the work. It is actually going to be extracted whenever you receive payment from your clients. So for indirect cost, we are assuming that maybe within the first period of months, because the client will give us advance payments, and the advance payment will be attached to work, procurement of materials, assembling and mobilization of our equipment, and the rest of them. So there will be little or nothing to be deducted out of that money as at that time. One of the things that we have to wait is we'll wait until when our certificate will start coming in. So for the purpose of this job, I imagine that our certificate will start trending in after the third month. So on the first month, we're using it to do our mobilizations and setting up. On the second month, we actually start construction work. And on the third month, we'll be waiting for them to approve our certificates. And then from the fourth month, we'll start receiving payments. Okay? Now, that is what I have to do now. What I will have to do now is that I now have a percentage of an amount that I'm expecting, which is equal to this percent, which is 15%. I've removed my profit already. And make sure that you fix it times the amount that will be coming in each of those months where you are expecting to be receiving your payment. I will say enter. Now, I will drag this amount down, but there is something you need to be watchful about. Now, there are some times when this amount of money will flow beyond your expectations, all right, based on what you're getting. There are times when it will be more than what you have expended. Always watch it, that it should not be more than that. If for any reason you made any miscalculation, you have anything wrong in your calculation, there are chances that this amount will be more than what you are getting. Like now, this is what is giving me, and it's not supposed to be. Let me format it properly so that you don't end up taking excess of what you're not supposed to be getting. So you have to always be watching what you're getting. As soon as you're getting to what you have, you now have to reduce it. Because in reality, when you come down to our overhead, the amount that we are expecting to be getting is from here up to here, which if you check it here is about 501 478 20016. 501 478 20016. All right. We'll come down to our cash flow and then we'll check what we are actually getting at the moment on our summary. 511 478 20016. Now, that means that I have already been able to spread all of this thing down, and it is showing me exactly what I need to see. Like I said, always be watchful, following it through. Once you finish one, then to do subsequent ones will not be difficult. But it's always very careful. You need to be more careful when you're picking up this number so that you don't end up putting things that are not supposed to be there. So we have our QSR Leo here. He says, sir, when forecasting for building materials, for instance, cement or reinforcement, is it applicable to use these values when adding up a rate? Thanks. If you want to forecast the price of materials, it might not only be wise for you to be using these things only for one particular material, because the inflation rate may not be affecting that material, may not be directly affecting that material. For example, some time ago, there was a marginal change in the cost of dollar. And people were expecting that because of that hike in dollar exchange rates, the price of cement will also go up. So if for any reason you were using your indices based on the exchange rates, and you want to also reflect the spike on the cost of cement, you discover that you'll be ending up projecting something that is very wrong. So, except you have a database where you can always extract information that relates with cement indices, then you can use that one to make your projections. But if it is the other indices or data banks that you have around you that are not only talking about construction material, but are having other aggregate of other inputs from other sectors, it may not be wise for you to rely so much on that to make your projections. The most important is this: the numbers can never lie to you. When you get the right number, when you use the right indices, it will always give you a clear picture of what the future projections should be. Now, we have been able to do all these things now. All that we have been able to establish are actually all the money that we'll be spending in the course of every month. Remember, from the beginning, we established that the work progress will always be based on these performance rates. Then this is the actual cost of the work that we'll be doing based on the net projected cost of our work. Then we are now adding our preliminaries. And then we are adding all the fixed time preliminaries. And then we included all the indirect costs that we have to pay out. Then the next column now is what you call your actual cash outs. The actual money that will be going out from you as the contractor. Now, this is a summation of all of these things that are happening on each column. So for each month, you go ahead and sum it up. This is the actual that will be taken up in a month, plus your fixed preliminaries, plus your time related preliminaries, and then plus indirect costs that you have, and you will have this one. So if I double click on this place, you now discover that it is a summation of all of them up to this point. Now you drag down and run it all over for all the period of your project onto the end also. Again, the next section is when you now start talking about your cumulative. Cumulative is always trying to aggregate, because valuation is actually also cumulative. You're trying to aggregate what you're spending over time so that at every point in time, you know the status, what you have spent. You don't have to go and start running the numbers again to know what the summation is. So to begin that cumulative, I will now say, my first month is this amount that I will spend. But for my second month, it is this amount plus the previous one that I spent in the last month. That is how you run cumulative. And then you now drag down accordingly, and then drag it down up to the last item that you have. When you drag it down, when you get to the last point, it will now be telling you that it's about 2.975 thereabout. That is the total cumulative that you will have. And this number you can always check again at every point in time. Even in your overhead, you can always run that check. And you say that this is the cost of your work. This is the cost of your work. And this is the cost of your preliminary. I've added it together. And this is the cost of the other aspects that you want to include. When you look on this summation aspect here that is over under here, these two tips that I have here, it is telling me that I have about 2.975 billion. So this is more or less giving you a trend of your informations. It's giving you a picture of the trend of how your information is going. Okay? So this number that we have here, 2.975 billion, is the same number that we have on here, 2.975 billion. It simply means that every of our calculation and projections from this point back to the beginning is accurate and is in order. Now, I have to introduce this line here now to tell you that no, you're not changing from all your expenses. You're not going to calculate what is supposed to be coming into you as a contractor. Remember, the basis of your inflow and the basis of every outflow expenses or income that you're having is based on your work rates. The more output you have, the more income you'll be getting. So I will close this place so that we'll have more space. Now, when I come down to that spot, remember when I try to show us the table here, the things that we need to include here, we have talked about the work progress. We have talked about the time. We have talked about contractors preliminary. This one is also part of the things that we have talked about already, which is your indirect costs. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is these ones on this part, which is your advance payments, retention, amortization, contractors' expenses, and of course, the most important, which is valuations or certificate, your monthly payments. So this is what we have here now, okay? These are the basic things that we're talking about now. So let's just continue from where we're now in our sheet that we have here now. The next thing we need to start talking about is the actual cash in, the money that will be coming in at every month. Remember, I told you that the first income that we had on our project is the advance payment. This advance payment, you can actually put it before your main cash in, because you can actually put it before it. It doesn't matter where you locate it. It doesn't really matter. So the first money we are giving is when you go to your contract condition. When you go to your contract condition, you will discover that there is a clause inside one of these places, I think from page 100 and something, whereby under the contract condition, there is a place where they will now tell you this is what the advance payment would be. All right. Now, always be mindful of these things. These information that you have on your Excel sheet, you're not just invoking it by yourself. You're actually picking it from your contract document. That's why we are talking about construction data. So when you come down here, you discover that we have an advance payment of 20% that will be given to us. Accepted value, advance payment here, item 14.2. Then also somewhere here, it tells us that the amortization of advance payment will be based on 33.3%. And then, of course, you go further also, you discover that retention will be 5% of your total contribution. And the limit of retention will be to the maximum of 5%. So these informations will find way in your cash flow, which is what we are trying to do here. But for emphasis sake, let me also point it out. The information I have on this table are not necessarily related to the contract condition that I just showed you. I only have to show you that contract condition so that you can always know that I just did not invent these figures by myself, but they are only related to the conditions that have been established in the contract that I'm working on. Okay. Now we say that our advance payment is 5% of or 15% of our contract. So we have to do the 15% of the actual cost of our contract minus VAT. I repeat it again. When you are expecting your advance payment, don't expect that the advance payment they're going to give to you will be inclusive of VAT. Sometimes they remove even provisional sums. So always run your calculation by yourself to be sure of what you can be able to negotiate and get for yourself. If you're able to get inclusive of VAT, good for you. But most contract administrators will not include VAT for you because VAT is not really your money per se and does not include any value that goes to you. Okay? So 15% of the total contract sum which I have here gives me about 511 million, and that is the amount that I'll be getting as my advance payment. And that advance payment will stand in for my first valuation. That is why between this month of advance payment up to a certain period of time, I may not expect any other income because I will be expected to use this advance payment reasonably to a certain period before I can start putting in my valuations. And in our instance now, we imagine that you have to work up to 3 months before you can start putting in valuations. Now, remember, when I come down to this place, actual cost, this actual cost that I have here, they are the actual cost of the work to me. And under my overhead, remember there was a factor that we developed, this factor of our markup. This is the factor that we use to multiply every cost of work that we did to be able to achieve this total sum, 3.6 billion. So this factor will always come relevant in your calculation. This is your markup. That is why at this point now, we'll be multiplying whatever it is that we're supposed to be expanding spending at every month, multiply it by the factor of 1.65 to give us what we are actually supposed to be getting. Because that factor of 1.65 includes both all the considerations that we have in our overhead, all these items that we have here. That factor includes all of them. That factor includes even also the preliminaries, contractors preliminaries that we have. The factor also covers everything that we have considered in projecting the actual concluding cost of this project. Okay, so I will now be multiplying all this expected amount of money by that factor. Okay, for the first month of our project, I will now say 20.613 million times 1.65 times 1.65. I will do that. And I have to do it for all the period because this is the basis of all my income. Now, let us now see a little trick. Now, we know very well that for the first 3 months, we will not be doing any job. We will not be putting any paper. But whatever work that we are doing has to be paid for because the contractor did not dash us money. Now, all it simply means is that we run that calculation and sum up all the work that we will do in the first 3 months of our project. It will give us a figure which is 106 million. That 106 million will now multiply 106 million times 1.65, and it will give me about 284 million, 100 and this. That is why when you look at it now, you discover that I have summation. This summation that I have here is a summation of these months that I am working, but I'm not going to be submitting certificate for. I sum all of them together, which is the summation of C8 to C11. And then I now multiply it by L6. My L6 which is the 1.65. Okay. Now, for the next month, when I'll start submitting my certificate, this is the first month when I'll submit certificates. I will include all the months that have worked before it, which is 3 months, plus the work that I will do in this month, sum all of them together and multiply it by the factor of my markup. That way, it will give me the actual cash value of work to me, including my profits, including my preliminaries, including my management fee, including the risk and everything. Then the next thing I have to do, the next one is more simpler because we're not doing any other summation. We just pick that month's production cost, multiply it by our factor, and it gives us, then we drag it down all throughout. When you drag it down all throughout, it will give you a value, which is about 3.58 million. Remember, it's always very important to always be, checking this cost against your bill of quantities At the moment now, the figure that we are looking at is not presently here because we have not included the advance payments that we receive and we have not removed it. Okay? So this is for this one. Then the next one is advance payment. We include the advance payment that we have received, which is on this month. And we do not, if you receive, sometimes advance payment may be coming in tranches. That is why you create a column for advance payments. And when you're receiving your advance payment in tranches, you also have to signpost each amount received against the month that you have received it. Let me close up this so that I will show it clearly. This is what I mean. If I receive another first tranche of advance payment in the first month and receive the next one in the 9th month or 10th month, I will signpost it against the 9th month or the 10th month, because that is where it will now accumulate. Now, the next thing for you to think about is you always have to consider in your contract, what is the period of your amortization? The contract sample of the contract that I've showed you, so that our contract will be amortized, 30% of it will be deducted at every point in time. Now, what I mean by that is that 30% of this, my advance payment, is what will be deducted in each certificate. So for you, you have to introduce a negative sign, put them inside a bracket and multiply it and say, this amount, 30% will be deducted in every certificate. So for every payment that you're receiving, we are minusing 30% from it. We are deducting it as in replacement for our advance payment. You will do it beginning from the month where you started receiving money. So for the first month where I received money, which is 280 something million, I'll multiply 30% of 280 something million. This is what I will do. Is equal to, open bracket, this amount times 0.3, or you say times 30 and put percentage, whichever one that you have. And because we are going to be removing this thing, you just put negative sign in front of the bracket and put enter. That is what we have. All right? That is how we have the number. Now, that's how we have the number. And you can go ahead and run this number all through all that you have. Run it down to the end, up to where you have your contributions. But remember very well that you must not exceed the amount that you have actually received. What I will receive is about 511 million. If you continue to drag it down, that means you end up taking away more than that amount from yourself. So when I got up to a point like this, up to here, it's the same from beginning, 3% of it, whatever I'm receiving, up to this very point. It happens to be that what I am, if I drag this number down, let us now show something. Look at what I will be having. I will be deducting over and above what they gave me as an advance payment. Therefore, what I need to do is, I will go back one step again and calculate what is the summation of these ones that I have here. I will minus the total amount that I have, which is about 485,733,797. I will minus it from my 511,478,082. And it will give me a balance of 25.7 million. I'll just come here and key that 25.7 million directly and minus it. That is the value that will be deducted from this thing and not at 3% in this very month. Once I get up to this point, I will now check also, and remember, you're comparing your facts, your data. This number is the equivalent of this number. It simply means that this amount is correct. If for any reason you made the mistake, let me show you how this mistake will show forth. If I make a mistake of doing this thing now, if I look at my S-curve, my S-curve will be showing me that on this place, my money will be, I would have reduced the cost of my money. You see that it's almost following up with what I have as against when the thing is properly the way it was. Let us see. Maybe this difference is not much. Let me do it this other way around. It will be very noticeable now. You see the margin that you have, your income is now trailing over under your expenses. Even though it is your income will still be above, but your expenses is now far and above because you're reducing the amount that is supposed to be your income and giving it as deductions for the advance payment amortization. So you just have to be careful of this at every point in time. Make sure that you don't fall into these pits. All right? Always ensure that the total amount collected here will always be equal. And then the next thing we need to talk about is our retention. Retention at every point in time. 5% of your retention will always be this. I have established the 5% of my retention, 5% of my total contract value. which is the limit of my retention. It simply means that you continue to remove retention for each certificate, which is 5%. You remove it until you get up to the maximum of this 170 something million that you have. Whenever you get to that maximum, you pause at that stage, because that is where, if for any reason the rate of retention is 10% as against 5% that we're doing here, it simply means that you will be able to recover this 5% earlier before now. So wherever you have exactly the same amount of retention, that is where you will stop your line and the rest will become zero, just like we have it here. Once you have gotten up to this point, congratulations, you have almost concluded all the things that are necessary in your cash flow. But let me also use this point now to call the attention to this. The cash flow that we're looking at here is a simplified version. There are actually more ingredients that we don't have considered here that actually make it into a cash flow. That you can talk about loans that you'll be taking to run your project. You can talk about the equipment that you'll be buying, new equipment that you'll be buying. You can talk about subcontractor works, prime cost works. I intentionally did not bring those ones here so that we don't get everything mixed up. But for the purpose of demonstrating cash flow, this is a simplified version of it that we can always use at every point in time and implement. Okay? Yeah, I have some questions here. QSCJ, the indirect cost is similar to the advance payment. Is this a coincidence? It is just a coincidence. It is not like it's intentional. Remember, we did a calculation. I ran a calculation about that, and I calculated that total cost of our indirect cost is about 900 and something million. But 15% of that indirect cost is not, this one is not giving us correctly. 15% of it is the equivalent of what we have here. 15% of it is the equivalent of what we have here. If you sum from here up to this point, it's giving you 15% here, like you can see, summary. And then if you sum out all the actual amounts of that 15%, it's giving you about 511, 478, 200, and 16. So I am not actually taking the cost for the advance payment here. It's just a coincidence that two of them look alike or very close to each other. Please, can you explain cash out again? Okay. For cash out, what I said about cash out is cash out as actual expenses that the contractor will incur in doing the work. And the basis of the cash out comes from the rate of his progress on the job. We have been able to establish the rate of our job. We said, okay, that our progress will be in the first 2 months of our job, we'll do 2%, we'll achieve 2% of the contract. In the rest 32 months of the job, we'll achieve 95%. And the rest 36 months of the job would have achieved the rest of the remaining 3%. What I now did was go ahead to divide this percentage that are projected to achieve in each of these cycles, divide them by the period interval in question. So for 2 months, 2% will be achieved in 2 months. I'll divide them equally among them. 95% will be achieved in 30 months. I divide 95% by 30 months. It will give me 3.166. Likewise, 3% will be achieved in 4 months, and I'll divide 3% by 4 months. That will give me these percentages that I have here, which are my outputs. Okay. Now, the next is for me now to signpost them against the contract duration. Our contract duration, like we have calculated and analyzed, is 36 months. I will now start signposting these things, these progress rates against each of those months. So for the first month, I'll put 1%. For the second month, 1%. For the third month, which is in this bracket, my progress rate will now increase to 3.1667. That is why you have 3.167 until you get to 32 months, which is 32 months, 30 plus 2, which is 32 months. So it will continue to be the same until when you get to 32 months. This is the 32 months. Then it will now change to the next one, which is 0.75%. That is how we're able to establish these progress rates. Now, the rest is this. We have already calculated when we are doing our costing that the cost of the work to us, the contractor, is about 2.061 billion. Now, I will now start multiplying that cost by this percentage output that I have here, performance that I have here, and it will give me these values. And I mentioned for additional columns, there are some times that you have expenses that are unforeseen that you did not plan for, but you have to make it for the work to move on. Those expenses are the things that you can put here. But the more things that you put here, the more your S-curve will be skewed. The whole essence of cash flow, a healthy cash flow, is to make sure that your expenses are always under your income. The red line are always trailing under your blue line, which is your income. That is our target. That is our goal. Okay. Then the other one is you accumulate all of these ones that you have spent in this month. This is the actual that we spend in a month. Actual in a month. You aggregate them. Then you now include your preliminaries, time-related and fixed, and spread them. The time-related, we say, okay, our preliminary will be spread over 6 months. Our fixed-related one, we'll divide this amount by 6 months and drag it down up to the 6th column. 1, 2, 3. That's the 6th column. Then for our time-related, we say that time-related, we also use this time basis of our execution as judgment to distribute our time-related. But at every point in time, always make sure that this total that you have at the end, cumulative total that you have at the end, is always tallying with every number that you're working against, so that you don't end up importing unnecessary error into your work. Then indirect costs, I mentioned it I just explained it not too long ago. Under indirect costs, you just have to extract a portion of your overhead that are actually going to be paid out. Your profit, you're not going to pay out your profit management fee, because that is the actual cost of the work, the head office overhead costs. Likewise, other costs that you have to incur. These are the things that you have to pay. And when you sum all this up, it gives you about 15% that we have here. The total amount is about 511 million and thereabouts. That is what we have on this section. That is what we have here. Under indirect costs now, that amount of money is what will now be spreading. But remember, we're not going to be taking this indirect costs from our account. We'll only be taking the indirect costs from what we are getting from the clients. All right. So that was why the 15% of our indirect costs is what we'll be returning from whatever certificate that we receive from the clients. That's why we have here 15% of this amount is what will come here each of these months. That will give you the total expenses that will be relatively, that will be giving you the cumulative in each month. And by cumulative, I mean that in the first month, what I will be spending is this. But in the second month, what I will be spending is this one plus the one that is the previous, which will give me this new figure. That is how you run your cumulative. The current plus the previous. And the thing will continue to go up until you come to the last time, which in all will have about 2.9 million. Okay? So that is how we run our cash out, just like you asked for me to explain it up to that point. Okay, I will quickly, then I talked about our retention. We have done our retentions. You now have to calculate each amount that will be returned in each month. Make sure that you're returning the proper amount. All right. So that is how we're able to explain the cash out that QS Ademola asked for there again. I hope you got that, QS Ademola. So let me try to round up so that we can go into question and answer proper before we go for a break. We have been able to do our retention to show what is actually being returned. Now, the next thing for you to do is now to sum all the items that are in each column. Okay? We are summing all the items that are in each column. That's why you have this one. It will now aggregate all of this plus this, and then sum all of them together, and you drag down. Now, look at where it becomes a little bit tricky. You drag down. It becomes a little bit tricky because the actual payment cycle is not exactly every month. Now, in the contract condition I have here open, most contract conditions will stipulate period for honoring certificates. All right. Now, you need to be watchful for that period for honoring certificates. When we go down a little bit, now look at what it's telling us here. Minimum amount of interim payment certificate. That means the amount that you should have, the value that you should have in each month for you to come up for certificate is about 1%. So if in anything we are doing, and total value that we have accumulated to be executed in this job in each month is not up to 1% of the total contract sum, there is no need for you to call for certificates. You have to wait until when you have accumulated up to 1% before you can be able to submit or put in your certificate. So note this one. Now, again, it says somewhere here, period of payment of advance payment is 28 days. This one is not the one I'm calling attention for. It is the one that is coming after it that I'm calling attention for, which is this one. Item 14.7 BI. Period for the employer to make interim payment to the contractor under subclause 14.6, interim payments. Now, see what it's saying here. It is 56 days. So even though we are doing our projects and progressing in monthly basis, and we are saying that we are submitting our certificates in monthly basis, the employer is not bound to pay us the money within the space of a month. There is actually about 56 days window between the man has to wait, process, and document, and then before making payments. That is why we need to always put that into the reality, into real things, what is actually happening in our project. That's why after having this monthly income that we're expecting, we now talk about the actual monthly income. How often this money is also supposed to be coming in. It will not be coming in every month like we have it every month. It will be coming in after an interval of maybe 2 to 3 months. Now we have a gap between 56 days is roughly about 2 months, which is why we have these 2 cycles here. So on the next month, you have a certificate. And what I am doing here is that I am now summing up all of this, all the months that are before that period that I have. And it says is equal to. So everything that has happened before this period up to this point will now come here. And everything that has happened from the next one up to this point will now come here. All right? That is what I now did in all of this, under my payment cycle. Because of the contract conditions, it might not always be the same. If you have a client who is paying you regularly monthly, you don't have to do it this other way around. But if you have a client who takes about 40-something days to process your payment, it is always wise that you project this into your cash flow so that you can always take that consideration when you are discussing with your bankers if you have to take loan to run the project while you're waiting for your payments to mature. Okay. So that is what we did now. We run through all of it up to the last day of our payments. And then at this point, I think it's important that I call our attention to something that is also very important. Remember, once you have completed the project after first 6 months or 5 months, based on the contract specification, your contract requirements, there is something called release of first moiety of your retention. Part of this money that is being owned will be released. If you're lucky that they release all of them, good and fine. If you're unlucky that they have to release half of it, good and fine. Based on whatever the specifications in your contract document, that is what you'll be doing. But in our case now, it is assumed that after 6 months, the money of our retention will be released to us. Now, it simply means that that money will now become an income, a cash in again that you are expected to come. So you can go ahead and put it here, or you may go ahead and put it under this other one. Whichever column that you choose to put it, so long as it is reflected as a positive income, it is always there. All right. When you put it here now, it will now see, because I added it here now, I am seeing it that in this month, I will be having an income of about 170 million naira coming as a repayment or release of the retention that was being held. And that money will transcend and continue to go. Now see, the last part of our cash flow, or second to the last part of it, is when we now start adding up all together all that is happening. What we're not doing is that we are summing up everything that is happening all together, this place, cumulative. The first one is 0, the second one is 0, and the third one is, the first one is 0, which is equal to this one, 0. The second one is equal to this plus this one, 0 also. And the third one is this plus this, 0. And when you run it through, all throughout, it will now take you down until you get to the last part. Run it down until the end. And then look at this figure. Compare this figure now that we have. Compare this figure that you have, this 2.97, and compare it with 3409 this. When you look at your bill of quantities, you should be able to see those figures. Okay, sorry. It's supposed to be here also in this bill of quantities, but it's not showing here. We're only seeing this one here, but the other part, we're not seeing it because of this part. Because of this one that is this 145 million that we don't have here. That's why we're not seeing it there. Okay? But you can always see it here clearly when you go over to your overhead. You will always see those figures clearly out there. It's always very important for you to always be checking what is going on in your documents. All right. So now I have come down to this final part of it. But now, it's not everybody that can be able to digest this information that you have in this your cash flow. The right way for you to present your cash flow is actually to present your cash flow using a chart. And the right chart for you to present is an S-curve. That is what I will now do. I'll just select this my column, select this column for my cash flow, and against this column for my cash in. Choose two of them together. Let me choose it, two of them together like this, one, and choose the other one also together like this, two. And then remember the time interval. Our time interval is months. I'll now choose the time interval also, which is like this, in months. As soon as you have done that, the next thing is for you to come up here on your Excel, go to Insert, click on the Insert. Under Insert, you have different charts that you can use. And one of the charts that we are looking at using is either a line chart. Line charts have different type of line charts. You can always find them here. When you open here, it's either you want to indicate it with points or you want to indicate it without points. Whichever one that works for you. For me, I like a smoother view. That's why I will do it without points. Either use scatter with straight line or use this other one. But this is the one I choose for this job. So we have something like this, which is also a replica of what we have here. This is the chart we just demonstrated how to create again. And one of the things that you can actually do is to start formatting these environments where you have. Like Excel has made it very, very user-friendly. When you want to format this my line amount column, just click anywhere on the amount column. It will highlight all of them in a box. As soon as you click it, it's now ready for you to start formatting. All right. Right click on any of them. If I want to increase the amount or change the cost, increase the quantity, I can always say, okay, increase the number by using this one. Normal text formatting that you can do, you can always do it here. Remove it from make it italic, underline it, whatever formatting that you choose, you think that is necessary for you to do at this point. You can always do it directly from here, even including changing the colors of the axis that you want. And if I want to do it also on my time axis also, the same way I can select it. Once it's highlighted, whatever formatting I'm doing here will be affecting that. That's how you can be able to do this. At this point, let me go to the equations and let's walk through the equations before we go on a break. And then kindly repeat how to come up with the multiplying factor of 1.65. Markup is the process of building in basic things that you need to take care of. Things that ordinarily are not things that you can easily count. Like when I was trying to explain that, I said in our markup, let's go to overhead. There are things that after you have itemized things that actually will go into your work, talk about contractors, preliminaries, and the rest of them. There are other things that you call indirect costs that you have to suffer in the process of doing the job. And one of such one, which we had a conversation about around it yesterday, is also withholding tax. And again, stamp duty. And previously, we also mentioned that there is also need for you to consider variation risk, construction risk, design risk, especially when you're working on a typical traditional procurement method, whereby the designer is different on the mostly engaged by the clients, and the contractor is on his own side, only for the purpose of coming to do construction. So you have to always allow for something called design risk, which will take care of whatever possible design errors or costs that you can incur based on omissions that were existing or unavailable information that were existing on your design as at the time you were tendering for the job. So maybe from experience, you can always work up what the actual percentage will be, or from your knowledge of a particular design consultant, you might know whether that consultant is given to details or not. If it's given to details, it simply means that you have almost all the information that you need to price. Thereby, the risk that you'll be having for your design risk will not be much. Also, if, for example, you know that that project will be constructed in a particular, using a particular methodology that is quite risky, then you now know whether you have to insert a certain amount or the percentage of risk that you have to allow for your construction risk. Now, all these things are the things that you have to, on your own, you have adjudged yourself based on your experience and based on your management decision. The first day I talked about this and I said that everything that is taking place under this indirect cost is all management decisions. you as an estimator, a good number of your work actually starts and ends in costing the actual cost of the work. Once you have finished the actual cost of the work and established all that is required, the rest of the decisions to be taken as regards to the markup that will be required is a management decision. Except maybe your level has risen up to that level that you can actually make that kind of decisions, then this is a management decision for you. But in this management decision, what they are doing more or less is like trying to signpost figures or amount, percentages to some of these things that have been highlighted. There is no limitations to how many that you can have here. You can have as much as possible. No matter what you have been able to identify in the project, that is the number of things that you can be able to itemize here. For us now, we are saying, okay, these are the basic ones, the considerations that we have on our indirect costs. We have management fee, head office, project risk, construction risk, price variation, withholding tax, stamp duty, and of course, profit, 2.5%. When you aggregate all of this together, it gives you about 27.5%. Now, it simply means that whatever it is that we're going to be charging as our work, we'll be adding 25%, 27.5% of it is what we want to take care of all these things. And by virtue of the cost of our work, that 27.5% equivalent of 937.71 million naira. But this is not the end of it. From this point now, what we need to talk about is how to be able to extract the actual markup factor that you'll be using to multiply any number so that you can get the equivalent of 27.5% outside of that. Now, the mistake some people make is that they use percentage, which is to say, I have 100 naira. This job will cost me 100 naira. And because I have already adjusted this to amount to about 127.5%, they will now say that this is equivalent of 1 plus 27% plus this 27%. This one is 100% of this, which is the amount here, plus 27%. They say that this is about the equivalent of escalating this amount by 127.5%. And when you do this markup and say this cost of your work times this your projected markup, it is giving you that this work is about 1,275 naira. But in reality, there is something called markup, and markup is used based on this formula that I have established here. When you are dividing 100% of something, say 1, like this 1,000, 100% of it. But inside that 100%, I want to establish this one will divide by this 100%, but I want to remove this factor from inside of it. That is why I put it inside bracket. 100%, which is 100% that will be dividing this one, minus this factor here. I close the brackets. In this way, you'll be get something like this. It will be something like 1 minus this percent. You'll be getting something lower value. Let me make it ordinary number. It will be giving you about 0.73 or 73% thereabout. So by the time you divide this number by this now, it will be taking care of it and give you a number that will give you that is an equivalent of this plus 27% of this inside it. This number here does not eventually contain 27% of this one. 1 divided by open bracket and close. 100% minus this percentage that I have here, and close the bracket and put it. It will give you a factor of 1.38 as against 1.27 that you have here. The factors are not the same. 1.38 as against 1.28. So when I multiply this one now, this times 1,000, it is giving me this amount as against what I have in this other one, as against this other amount. That is to say that if I have to remove 1,000 from here, I will still have the equivalent of 27.5% of 1,000. But when you use the other one percentage, it doesn't give you the same thing. This is why since 2016, I have been advocating for people to be using markup instead of percentages. So this is how we're able to establish it. And here I said, okay, for the contractor's work, including his profits, he will be making a markup of about 1.379. But because there are other works that the contractor will not be doing by himself, especially when you have a project that has nominated subcontractors, For nominated subcontractors, what the contractor is doing is only paying the subcontractor on behalf of the client and also providing attendance, supervision, and monitoring the subcontractor. That is all that he's doing. So the contractor will not be charging for profit. In that case, the whole of this percentage minus profit is what the contractor will now be doing. That is why the formula for that is a little bit different. It's the same. 1 divided by, also open bracket, 1 minus. We now remove the whole of this one, 27.5%, minus the profit, because the contractor will not be taking profit for work that he did not do. The client has engaged a subcontractor who will do the work. It is only attendance and supervision and monitoring that the contractor will be providing. So the contractor will only receive what is due to him for attendance and supervision. That is why in this formula, we now have to remove it from this indirect cost now. This is the indirect cost minus profits, and we close it. That is, will give us a lesser factor, which is 1.176. So for every work that you have that is to be executed by a subcontractor, this is the factor that you'll be using. Not just a subcontractor, but a nominated subcontractor. This is the factor that you'll be using. But for every work that the contractor will be taking profit for, this is the one that you'll be using. I hope you have been able to understand it that way. And if you don't get it still, you can always fall back on the first explanation, initial explanation, which we gave during the first training on the first day. I think I threw more light on that. Okay. That is for Samson Adebayo. Sir, can we get soft copy of this template for practice? QS Joshua, please, I will release the soft copy, but the essence of making the copy available to you and the template available to you is for you to always find a way to enrich it and customize it to yourself. Not for you to only be depending on this one that we have here. Because if I have errors that I have in this document and you continue to adapt it without properly proofing it for yourself, you might end up endangering yourself. So I will still release the document to you, but be careful when you're using it. We expect you to enrich more, to add more values to this content that you're receiving, so that people also in time to come will benefit from your understanding of this experience. Okay, QS Nsika Akobon, please, if I want to include other considerations such as PC items, machineries, etc. on the cash flow, how do I go about that? Now, if you want to include something like PC sum, a PC sum will just be part of your expenses that will be going out. It will be part of this place around this side. Somewhere here before you have your cumulative in a month, before you have your total in a month, you will now put in, you create a column that will be PC sum. You establish the total amount that are actually PCs only that you'll be spending. Now, those total amount is now what you now be. So, okay, for this month, this is the amount that we expect to spend. If you have something like lift, and lift will be executed as the maybe 25th month of the project, you have no business trying to put the cost for executing lift from the first month or anywhere before the 25th month. It's always appropriate that you should put it at the period where it will be executed. For our instance, now we're saying lift will be executed around this 25th month. So this is where you now put in your lift and establish it there. And of course, if the total value of the cost of the lift will be expended at once, that is the same amount that you'll be putting in here. Or if it will be expended over a period of time based on this progress of work that you have established here, then you have to use this factor to spread it. But always watch out for that pitfall, which I mentioned to you, that any amount that you are imposing must tally with what you have at the end here. If it does not tally, then there is a tendency that your red line, which is your expenses, will be above your income, which is your blue line. And QS Munawara says, good morning. It's possible to get this spreadsheet to practice. Yes, we'll make it available to you. This other one says, can the time rate be quarterly instead of monthly? We did a similar thing now. Yes, it depends on the period of your construction. What we did is this. Our understanding is that our construction period is monthly. If your own is quarterly, just establish these time intervals to be quarterly and try to be consistent with whatever time interval that you're using. Even if your own is weekly, if you have people who are preparing cash flow based on weekly projections. So basically what you see around is monthly, but if you have it quarterly, that means you will have quarter 1 and quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4, and the rest of them. That's how that one should flow for you. Brendan says, QSCJ, hi. I can see you are teaching us from client QS point of view. What of from contractor QS point of view? Actually, QS Brendan, I am not only giving you the client's aspect of it. I am actually balancing whatever I'm making, presentation I'm making. Because currently my background now is the contractor. I'm a contractor QS. Before I joined contractor side, I was there on the client side. So if all your understanding is the aspect that I'm saying that relates to the client's QS, well, you might need to rewind the video to actually get the other parts, but it's still there. I can assure you that. All right, sir, what do we use amortization for, and where is it applicable? Amortization is the process that you use in recovering the money that you have given out. Amortization is like when a client gives you advance payments. The process of reclaiming that money back one after the other, 1 month or interval, or based on the defined deduction rates as possible, that is called amortization. You use it only when you are recovering money that you have given, an advance payment that you have given to a contractor ahead of time to help him mobilize on site on the project. Kiyosa Barry, please, PR not one of the indirect costs. I mentioned it that PR is actually part of an indirect cost. You must not show, I did not show it on my presentation because we don't speak about PR per se. We know it's something that goes on behind the scene, but we don't talk about it so that people don't get the wrong notions about PR. You can actually use PR to do a lot of positive things. But when you say PR, oftentimes people's mind go to the wrong thing. So we don't like projecting PR in a public settings like this so that you don't give people the wrong notions at every point in time. Yeah, QS Samson again, he says, what if the cash flow is both monthly and quarterly? For instance, a facility management service. So I don't think you can have a cash flow that is both monthly and quarterly. But what I can advise is that if you have a cash flow that is quarterly, that is monthly, or quarterly rather, anyone, calculate it based on monthly, then you can always sum up whatever activity that transpires within a month, sum them up within the quarter that they come up. For example, if with this cash flow that we have just prepared is supposed to happen on the basis of quarterly that you said, now we know that a quarter is from 1 to 3. This is 1 quarter. The second quarter is this. The third quarter is this. So for this quarter 1, what you'll be reporting as due for your quarter 1 will be a total of all of this one that is here. That is your cash out. And the income will be a total of all that is here. That will be your cash in. For quarter 2 also, you do a similar thing also. It will be for this period from here up to here. And also your cash out will be from here up to here. So that way you can always be able to narrow it. Even though you calculated it in monthly, you can be able to aggregate them back into quarter presentation as you deem fit. I hope we were able to get this section that we talked about. The next part that we're going to look at also, like somebody is was saying, most of the presentation was basically on the side of the client's QS. But the next aspect I'm going to be presenting also, you cannot say that for now because that one will be looking at it more balanced. I will be presenting something from the side of the contractor. When you have different contractors bidding on a job, you have Cetraco, you have Julius Berger, you have maybe Arab contractors, you have any number of contractors that you have bidding on a particular job. The information that you're going to be getting from their submission, from their quotations, will form a basis for you to have an insight and be able to predict their actions. Because whether you like it or not, we're talking about construction being a business. And in a business, you're only leveraging on your strategy to be able to overcome or to be able to be ahead of your opponents or people that you're bidding with. So to establish that, there are some things that we need to define. Before now, we have been able to talk about some concept that we know already. When you're talking about the cost of a bid, maybe the cost of your when you do tender, you call for tender opening now for a job. Every contractor has bidded for the job based on provided contract documents. Now that provided contract document is supposed to be uniform for all of them. And for all of them to be bidding, their bid will only include these things that we have here. What I have here, for every contractor's bid is made up of the cost of the work, which you have established, plus markup. Remember, during our overhead, we'll try to explain to us that the cost of our project is only the cost of the work, which we have here at the last part. The cost of the work, which we have here, when the estimator have estimated, what he has actually done is just preparing the cost of the work plus the markup. And the markup factor, I have established my markup factor to be this. This is the markup factor. The process of calculating the markup factor and generating it, we have also talked about it in a previous meeting here, which is what we have here. So for what we are talking about next, we are trying to define for every bid that is open, the cost of that bid, the contractor's bid that you have presented, includes two aspects, two things: the cost of the work plus the value that is included in the markup. So this one, note that this is the cost of your work. Now, the next thing that you need to understand also, every cost of work includes some of these other breakdown or components. And one of those components is the cost of the material cost, labor cost, plant cost, subcontractor cost, indirect costs. That is what makes up the cost of work itself. Now, when you come down to this other part of it, which is the markup, the things that are major components of your markup, which we have explained when we're under this overhead, are your overhead, the management interest, risk interest, design costs, insurances, etc., and so many other things. So the more things that you have making part of your overhead or your markup, the more cost of your bid would be. But basically, because all the contractors are bidding on established standard information, call it bill of quantity, call it contract documents, which is uniform for everybody, it simply means that the only thing that will be making the difference from all of their costing will be the composition of their markup. And then in reality, when I look at the cost of your work, I can always be able to establish the markup from your cost of your work. So the only thing that can make a difference is that once I know your markup, you can always be able to calculate at every point in time. Once you know somebody's bid price, remember, I am mentioning some new terms here. The first thing I mentioned is your bid price. Your bid price is the same thing as the final figure that you have submitted that was opened. The final figure I'm talking about is your contractor's bid. That is the same thing as your bid price. When you mention your bid price, which you have bidded for the job, when I divide it by the cost of the work and minus one from inside of it, I will be getting the markup. Let us demonstrate that. Now, in this job that I have here, the bid price for this bill of quantity that we have here will be this 366559292.06. That will be the bid price. Now, the cost of the work will be 2.061 this. You see? So what I'm trying to say is that your markup factor is the same thing as your bid price, which is this amount, divided by the cost of work minus 1. That will tell you that all of these things that I'm doing, I am marking up my work by about 77 points. I think this didn't go well. It didn't go well. Let me put them in brackets so that Excel will operate them properly. Okay. Now, this is what it simply means. My bid price divided by my cost of work minus 1 gives me my markup percentage. All right? That means that all of this in the markup percentage that is inside this thing is about 77%, 77.82%. So this is what I try to establish on this place. That is the markup percentage. It gives you a certain number that you have to use to escalate whatever is the cost of the work for you to be able to get to your bid price. Follow my line of thought. What we are trying to talk about is this. I want to stay in my office and rely only on the outcome of my bidding processes with you to be able to project what you will be bidding. And this thing we're talking about is a subject of so many doctoral theses. But I am going to now bring it down in a simpler way that we use it without even going too far into doing research and analysis and stuff like that, doing regressions and doing correlations and the rest of them. Now, I have been able to establish, that is how we can be able to establish our markup percentage. Now, the next thing that you need to understand is your markup factor. This markup factor, we have already explained it when we are talking about our overhead factors here. It is the same thing as our markup factor without the percentage. Okay? So now, having noted all these things down now, the next thing is for us now to go into actual things that happen. When your practice knows some of these basic concepts, the next thing is for you to now to start gathering your data. In the first data that we have here, we have a tender opening results. We bid on a particular project that is 10,000 capacity studio indoor auditorium complex in Abuja for NIQS. And then in that bid, we have in attendance our participation, Julius Berger, about 8 contractors bidded on that job. Let me quickly remove these parts. Now, about 8 contractors bidded on that job. Now, when you do your tender opening, this is a typical tender opening sheet or tender opening results. Now, in that result, there are some key things that you're actually picking out. One of the things that you're picking out is what? The bid amount or the bid price. Every contractor will be announced his bid price. And then if there is a bid security requirement on the project, it will be announced, because when a bid security is an important part of a procurement process, when you don't provide it, it is actually what is called material deviation from the requirements. It simply means that even if you may have the lowest price, like where we have the lowest price here is about 6.65, which is Mothercat, is the lowest price here. Now, if for any reason, Mothercat, even though they have the lowest price, even with their expertise and their technical qualification, they did not submit bid price or bid security, it simply means that they would have materially deviated from the requirements that are recommended for this pre-qualification. So they will be disqualified, their submission will be disqualified, and the next runner-up will be considered. So you have to consider, create a column also for bid security. And then 2% of the bid security will be announced, which is 2% of their bid price, is what will be announced here. And what I went ahead to do is to put it in a Excel formula. 2% of this amount is what we have here. And I went further to make it round number. So we drag it down across. The next thing you have to do is you talk about ratings, so how you rate them, okay? Now, in rating, what we're doing is this. We're taking the lowest bid, and we are considering every other person from the lowest bid so that we can know how many percentage away that this other person's bid is more than this other person, okay? And then we talk about validity period. Remember, we talked about validity period on the first day when we begin this section. So you also have to take note of everybody's validity period, because most of the times, the more longer the validity period, the more higher the bid prices will be, because the person would have considered possible inflationary trend within that time frame that you're projecting into. And of course, you talk about also the completion period. So these ones that are mixing up here, which is the markup and the ratings, are the things that we have to derive from this data that we have here. And to derive that now, we first of all have to establish what is our lowest bid. I am only basing this discussion based on the fact that the consideration is based on lowest bidder. I repeat it again, not best performing bid, lowest bidder. So for the lowest bid, it is always very important for you to look at the lineup of all the data set that you have and come somewhere inside your sheet and extract and say minimum. This MIN function returns the minimum value or the smallest value in a data set. So I will highlight all of them from beginning to the end and say enter. And it will tell me that the minimum, the lowest value is about 6.645 billion. And that is the value that was quoted by RCC on number 2. Okay? Now, what I will now be doing is for me to get a percentage deviation from RCC. RCC will be the basis of me comparing every other person to know how far away those people's bid were above RCC. And to do that, we say equal to, you open your bracket. It's very important. The same formula that you use in establishing inflation that we talked about yesterday is also the same formula that you use to do this other one. I will now say, okay, sorry. I'll start it from the beginning. Open brackets. This is the bid price of Julius Berger minus the bid price of RCC that we have here, which is our basis. Remember, make sure that you fix RCC on here and close it, and then divide it also by the same RCC and close it. And make sure you fix it also and say equal. Now, it tells us that Julius Berger bidded about 9.10% higher than RCC. And when I drag it down across board, it will reflect to me the deviation away from RCC bid. That even our own, which is our consideration, which is number 4, NIQS training, we are bidding about 4.59% higher than what RCC bidded. Okay? Now, once we have gotten this part right, the next part that we need to talk about is we now go with what we know as against what we don't know. Remember this formula that we established here, that in as much as you know the markup factor, you can always calculate the bid price. And in as much as you know the bid price, you can always project, you know the cost of work and the markup factor, you can always calculate the bid price. In this case now, we don't know the markup of Julius Berger and RCC and CGC. We don't know the markup of Dantata, Gilmore, Cetraco, and the rest of them. But we know our markup, that based on the calculations that we did in our overhead, that our markup is 1.6542. So we come down here under our bid and say our markup is 1.65542. Now that we have noted this one now, we use the basis of this one that we have established to start working against other people. Now come down to this other, on the one side, this is the analysis that you have done. The person that went to the field that attended the tender opening has returned back all this information minus these calculations that we are going to be running now. Now he has returned all this information that I did not highlight. And now we are now coming back in our office. We're now going to be projecting. So the first thing calculation we need to do is...
We're trying to get to an agreement.
Hello? Hello, KS Jamila, can you mute yourself? So what we're not doing is this. We now say, look at what we did here earlier. Our markup percentage is same thing as our bid price divided by the cost of work. That is our markup percentage. But indeed, our markup itself will now be our bid price divided by the cost of work. That is the markup factor. But if we want to convert it to percentage, we have to minus by -1. But we're not going to the percentage anymore. So what I will be doing here is that my cost of work itself is what am I going to establish now. The cost of work from what we have here, cost of work is the same thing as the contractors. The cost of work is this cost of work plus contractors bid. All right. What we'll now do is that this cost of work is equal to, this is our bid divided by the markup that we have. Because the relationship between our markup and our bid is from what we have here. This one plus this one, or you can even use times. I think it's actually times that I'm supposed to use here. But the fact I'm trying to say that inside your bid price, you have your cost of work in addition to your markup. But the reality is that you have your markup times your cost of work. That will give you your bid price, and which is what we have just established here. So you divide it the other way around. Bid price divided by the markup will give you your cost of work. Okay, so we can call this column cost of work. Now, once you have gotten your cost of work, the rest, it is now very easy for you to now stop projecting other people's cost of work. Why I'm saying this is because the whole judgment that you're basing, this pricing that you did here, is based on this information that is provided on your tender documents. And everybody will be providing the same information. The cost of work will be relatively the same. The only thing that will be different is maybe methodology, which has little or no impact on the actual cost of work. Okay, so long as both of you, everybody, all contractors that are bidding have been categorized to be of the same class, chances are that they will have almost the overhead that is within the same region. They have the same expertise that is within the same region. They have so many things in common. So when they have a lot of things in common, that means that their consideration will include some of those basic things when they are determining their actual cost of work. The thing that will be different is when you are now applying markup, when you are bringing in things which are unique to them. All right. So with that in mind, we'll now know that for us to start projecting against every other person's work, we can now project what is the possible markup factor that these people used. The markup factor that they use will now be something like this. Remember I said your markup factor is this one will now be something like this. Let me make it like a formula so that I will just go ahead and drag it through. The formula will now be this price divided by the cost of work. I'll fix this cost of work because I'll be dragging it down. And oftentimes it's always good for you to round it up so that you don't have floating numbers. I'll round it up to 4 decimal places and I'll close the brackets. Now I have it that the markup factor that these people, Julius Berger, used is about 1.4726. 6. I am relating it to my actual cost of work because the actual cost of work is uniform because all these contractors that are bidding for this job are on the same category. That is why initially, if you remember very well, Nigeria, they always advertise projects based on categories of contractors. They will say category A for contractors in category A. That is what they will take for when they are registering you. But today, they don't do anything like that again. So it's not an all-commerce job. That is why you can see somebody pricing a particular job 50 million naira, whereas in the same project, you're seeing another person pricing it 200 million naira because they don't have the same ranking or rating. The contractors don't have the same rating. But if in this ID case we're talking about, we are dealing with contractors that are at par, that have the same rating or ranking, chances are that their cost of work will be uniform. Even if it has to vary, it will be varying slightly based on one other factors. This is where that the theoretical part, which I mentioned to us, the thesis aspect, which I mentioned to us, comes into play. At this point now, they will now start testing what are the possible contributors to reasons why their cost of work will vary. They start testing for different things, location, testing for connections and the rest of them. But that is not our focus in this analysis. So once we have gotten up to this point, the next thing is for you to drag down. The calculation will be coming down. If I get up to this point, I will just copy and right click and say copy value. So I don't mess up my own, which I have here. And I can then extend it down. So in as much as I've been able to establish their markup factor for each of them, the next thing I can do now is this. Using the same calculation that I did for myself here, I can now go ahead and spread that same calculation to be able to achieve the cost of work which they bidded. And from that projection which we talked about, you discover that they bidded almost the same thing for the work. Now, further analysis can now tell you what are the possible reasons why this thing is not uniform. But that is not what we're discussing. What we're talking about is we have been able to extract what this man who bidded on this job, his markup on this job. All right. Then similarly also, we had the same experience. We bidded for another job also that have almost the same ranking of contractors. Because the essence of this thing is this: the more data that you have, the more you can be able to project into the future. So the more times you are bidded against a particular contractor, the more you can be able to predict his trend. This is very important, so that when you are bidding, you now know if you are coming against the same set of contractors whom you know that you have advantage over, or whom you know have more advantage over you. When you go and analyze yourself and see whether there is a way you can actually be able to bid better than them, you can now consider a certain amount which you have established to be the marginal difference between your bid and their bid. You can always offer that in as your discount. That way, you will still be bidding ahead of them. But this technique is useful when you are talking about competitive bidding. So we have this second bid. The first bid was for a 10,000 capacity indoor auditorium. And the second one is for a trunk A expressway, section 2, phase 1. We don't have exactly the same list of contractors that we have here, but we have some of them available. Now, we did the same thing which we did before here, the way we generated it here, and we're able to also come up with the same analysis here. And we have the figure. Now, we also did a third time. The more results that you have to compare, the more rich and accurate your projection will be. Just keep that in mind. We did the same thing again with a different contractor, even having new contractors that we don't have before in the past. So we have this opening again for section 2 or phase 2 rather. And this is the outcome of the projection. Now, having gathered this result, the next thing now will now be for you to go and start analyzing the results, which is where this other part comes in. In analyzing this result, look at what we did now. This is the list of those contractors that we have who have been bidding against in time past. In the first bid that we bidded, we were able to extract all the markup that they have, all their markups. We extracted all their markup and put them in here against them. In the second bid also, we extracted their markup and put them in. On the third bid also, we extracted their markup and put them in. Now, if you look very well now, the next thing we need to talk about is what is the average of all these persons' markup, and it gives you a figure. The average of all their biddings is what you're calculating now. It gives you that figure. Now, look at what we're going to be doing. The final aspect of this analysis that we are doing is we are going to be relating this, how much does their bid deviate away from our own? This is our own here. How much does their bid deviate from our own? That is our intention, because we are rating their performance over time against our performance in such number of times that they have performed. That is what the next aspect is doing. And this place is where we start doing that relationship. What we do here is this. I said, okay, the same way we are talking about deviations, we'll talk about this person's bid minus our own. I think I need to fix our own so that it doesn't shift away from there. Close it and divided by our own. Enter. Now it tells me that the contractor Julius Berger is bidding about equivalent of 2.7% higher than my bid. Okay. Okay, let me increase so that I will see the percentage completely. It's 2.74%. 2.74% higher than my bid. Now I can go ahead to drag it down. Now this other person is bidding about 1. CGC is bidding 1.1% higher than my bid. If I am to drag also over my own, it will be 0 for my own. Let me make it yellow so that I will always know that. Now for the people that are bidding below me or higher than me, okay, look here now. We have an error which is coming in from 2 people. Gilmore, because we don't have enough information on Gilmore's submission. He has only bidded only once. So his contribution here is trying to corrupt our projection. And of course, we have Mother Cards, who also bidded only once, and Heartland. But the other ones that have been bidding more often than us are the ones that we should be looking at. Okay? Now, what does this thing tell us? What it's telling me is that the figure I'm looking at here now is telling me that if I am bidding against Julius Berger's bid is always higher than my bid by about 2.74%. Similarly, RCC's bid is always lower than my bid by about 6.04%. CGC own is always lower than my own by about 1.41%. Likewise, also, Market's bid is lower than my own. And all of these ones are lower than my own because my own is always higher. If we look at it also here, our own, which is NIQS here, is higher than most of the aggregate of some of these other ones. 2.9 is higher than this other one minus Julius Berger. Is higher than all these ones minus these other ones too. So it simply means that if I am bidding against them, I need to remove 6.0% as my discount for me to be able to bid whatever RCC will be bidding on a project. That is to say, if I am bidding with RCC on a job, and after doing my calculation, that job I am getting the equivalent of 2-point-something billion on that job. I need to give a discount of about but now it simply means that if I have bidded a job of 2.061 billion and I am bidding against RCC, whom I have noted over time, I've tracked their performance against my performance over time, and I discovered that their performance is always on the average of 6.04% lower than my own. It simply means that if I want to beat RCC on my job, I need to go lower than this 6.0 something percent, because that is the trend of their performance over time. When I do that discount and offer that as a discount on my project, I might even say, okay, let me go below this amount, this number. Let me go below by either 7%. All right. I might say, let me go below by 7%, which is 0.07. And whatever it is that RCC is going to be, submitting as their bid price, because I have now tracked their performance and I remove the equivalent of that edge which they have over me from my cost, then I can be able to beat them. You are not going to throw away this money. No, you're not going to throw away this money. You are only going to consider it in your analysis when you're talking about your profit margin. This is where you have to talk about it. You can say, okay, instead of me bidding 12.5% and then losing the edge of 6-point-something%, which RCC is having over me, I can come here and say, let me discount 7% from 12%. And then my profit now that I will be targeting to be able to beat them will be about 5.5%. When you do this kind of calculation and projections, your final rate now will be falling far below that which ROCC has been offering. I don't know if we get what we're talking about now. So this is how we can be able to make these projections. This is how we can be able to do this analysis. This is how we can be able to, over time, track the activities of a particular contractor and be able to project their moves as they progress. So I hope we were able to get the message there. And if we did not get it, maybe you can always rewind the videos and play back as much as possible. So I will be attending to the questions now. Okay, QS Modisol, kudos to you, sir. I'd love to know whether payment cycle is conditional or not, and more enlightenment of the word payment cycle. Thanks. Okay, I tried to show you an example of what I mean by a payment cycle. I have a contract document here. I'm not just quoting from my head. I have a contract document now. It's actually a tender that is in progress. The tender is expected to be closing on sometime in 5th of October or thereabouts. Now, what determines your payment cycle is here. Under this standard condition of contracts for FIDIC 2017, the payment cycle that they have recommended here is 56 days. You can call it monetary or whatever you want to call it. But it simply means that the contractor, the employer will not honor any certificates until after 56 days when it was submitted. And it simply means that if you have a project that you have a certificate that you have submitted, a timeline between when you have submitted it and when you receive the money. And that timeline, you can only take care of it when you come to your calculations, like we've showed here. That's the timeline that we try to project here under this column. Ordinarily, this would have done the thing for us, and we'll just do a cumulative based on that. But we now have to cushion this time lag, which we have to take care of here. The document said 56 days. And then 56 days will also include both weekend and the rest of them. And then we are given an additional 4 more days to make it 2 months. All right. So if we finished the month 1 certificate now, the next time we'll be submitting it, it will be after 2 months. That's when the payment will be coming in, which is in this month. After 2 months again, when the payment will be coming in, which is in this month. After 2 months again, when the payment will be coming in, which is in this month. Even though we are submitting our valuation certificates monthly, the clients will only be attending to them after 2 months. That is why you have them aggregating after 2 months. Okay? And that is why when you're looking at the S-curve, the S-curve will be giving you this kind of rise. It will rise, which is in the 2 months, and then it will run for some period, and then rise again when the 2 months evaluation drops, and run for some time again. When it drops and run for some time, when it drops and run for some time. But for some things, I don't know what I did that it is now running below. It's running one now below. That is why we have this thing here. I think I actually did something to my cash flow. That's why it just okay. That's it for Modisol. QS Femi says yes. Okay, QS Abbas Hamza. He says, please, how do you add this $sign to the formula when calculating for the markup? When I am calculating for markup, I don't use $sign. I don't think I have $sign on anywhere that I calculated for markup. I don't have any $sign here. There is no $sign on it on my markup. And there is no $sign here on it. So but if you want to put a $sign on any figure that you have, assuming that this is the number that you want to put a currency symbol on it, the easiest way to put the currency symbol is to look on this upper side of your this thing. You see accounting. When I click it, it will give me a currency symbol. But if for some purposes what you prefer is not the $sign, you can use your Ctrl+1 and then come down to the numbers that you will need under your currency. You now come down to symbol of the currency and search for Naira. But they want to confuse us. For Naira, they have multiple Nairas. I don't know what is their intention, whether they want to fragment Nigeria into different currencies. So we have Edo Naira, we have Fulani Naira, we have Hausa Naira, Ibibio Naira, Igbo Naira, Kanuri, and the rest of them. So I don't know what exactly is the intention of Microsoft in putting Naira with this. Well, as when you come to pounds, you only have £1 sterling, and when you come to US, you have US dollar, and you have other people that have their currency that use a different currency. But for Naira, they included all the nationalities that is in Nigeria and created a Naira for them. So we can just say, okay, let us quickly put a Naira currency for Edo, for example, and it's not really different from the ones that we have. It will still give you the Naira currency. This is how you can be able to put that Naira currency. Now, QS Aliu says, please, how do you come up with the second bit security? Can you please take that again? Like I said, bit security is actually, the percentage of bit security will be given to you when you are doing your pre-qualification. Inside these documents, most of the documents that you'll be receiving for procurement in Nigeria by any authority that is using public fund, it will contain two of them. One, it will contain the aspect that has to do with the procurement or instruction to tenderers, which is what we have here. The ones that are under the instruction to tenderer that will help you to prepare your document for tendering, you will find them under instruction to tenderers. And that will come under your bid data sheet or under your instruction to tenderers. We talked about this extensively during the first day of our meeting. So maybe you may need to wait until you go and watch the videos and get the other insight that you need from that video. All right, let me answer the last question here, which I have here. I think he says, I noticed that the cost of work under the tender analysis is different from that shown in the BOQ. Why is this the case? The cost of work under the tender analysis is different from that shown in the BOQ. It's different because we're not talking about the same project. We are talking about different projects. I am giving you an instance of a tender opening result that you bidded on, how you can be able to get insights and know what the other contractors are thinking or what they are going to bid in the next time that they will be bidding for a job against you or against any other person. Chris Damilola says, sir, I think what he means about $ is when you want to fix a particular row for that. Okay, thank you for that clarification. When you want to fix your movement, when you want to drag a cell and you don't want the relative reference to be dragging alongside with you, you introduce $ either before the alphabet, which is your column, or before the number, which is your row. So whenever you introduce $, one of the ways to fix it particularly is by clicking your F4. F4 is a function on your keyboard. When you put F4, automatically it will fix the row and fix the column. But when you want to put it particularly to rows, make sure that the $ is in front of the numbers. When you want to fix only the column, make sure that the $ is in front of the alphabet. But when you want to fix dollar and when you fit the row and the column, make sure that the $ is in front of the column and as well as in front of the numbers, which is the row. Okay, that should be able to do it. I think we have been able to do justice to all the questions that we have here today.
QSCJ, wow, thank you so very much for the wealth of knowledge. This is knowledge overload. And I heard when somebody was saying, can the template be shared? It's fine, you can share the template, but like CJ said again, we are lazy, and that's no disrespect to anyone, but it's just saying what it is. We get too used to one thing and we do not want to explore. Now, these things that he has taught us today and that he has painstakingly taken his time to teach us can be applied on literally anything. It doesn't even have to be construction data. It could be election data. It could be farmers data. It could be so many things. It's all about data analysis, right? Data analysis and data management. So do not restrict yourself to the templates that are shared on the groups with regards to the trainings that are being held. Challenge yourself and apply these things taught on a regular bill that you're working on. If you're depending on the office that you work on, you have so many bills, you have so many projects that you've handled. Challenge yourself after you've studied and practiced using the spreadsheet that was used in class. Use another spreadsheet and apply the same thing. Because guess what? That is the only time you would understand that, yes, what has been taught, you have actually internalized it. Because if you don't do that and you're still using that same template that was that you were taught with is same thing as cramming. Now, if you're removed from that comfortable space and you're given another scenario, for instance, you will not be able to function as effectively because you haven't practiced with other examples. So I hope this would help, and it would also encourage us to practice, and internalize what is being taught. Thank you so very much once again.
Also, we have an attendance, QSera has watching what is going on. So I don't know if she has one thing or the other to tell us, because her own field is actually one of our envy sectors that we are envying to get to. If she's available and around, maybe she can unmute herself and tell us one thing or the other that we are doing differently.
Just say it, oil and gas. Just say it. Just say it.
I could just sneak in and sneak out. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon. CJ, I don't know what to say. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. So the only part I just want to mention is that progress. Usually when you're doing the cash flow, you see where we did the percentage spread for the months. So if you have your schedule will make it easy for you to know the percentages for each of those months, your planned percentage, so you can move it. So that's where your costs and your cash flow will now talk, and your schedule will talk. Yes, exactly. Where he's highlighting. So you can get that from your schedule itself, or when you loaded costs on your schedule, so you can get that from that's this. So you don't need to extrapolate it yourself. It will now come like the actual plan. So by that, your schedule and your BOQ can talk to each other. I think that's just the only thing I'll mention there. But thank you. This is quite very, very insightful. Thank you so very much. How I wish when we were growing up, we had this opportunity. And I jealous the young QS that are coming up. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, QSera. We've missed you. Thank you. Thank you for following up and still being a part of this. We really appreciate your constant support. QSCJ, do you have anything before we wrap up finally?
My word is, I really appreciate the opportunity of sharing this knowledge and insights with all of you. Because some of these informations, the more you think you know about it and you don't use it, the less you know it actually. So whenever you find an opportunity of using them, always use it. That's why I encourage us, please let us not restrict ourselves to this information, because most of the information that I have given out today are not only the information that are available to my organizations. Some I actually have to learn over time to be able to get to them. So I encourage us to always make that progress in our careers. Thank you.